Are we about to get into World War III?
Look at the news and look at all of the doomsday stuff. We're at one of the safest times in history. There are always things that are going on behind the scenes. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I mean, maybe a few people.
What's up, Ryan? How you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you, Bobby?
Oh, thanks for rescheduling with me. I feel like I'm just drowning in like toddler drama. I've got a 3-year-old and he's a lot, man. And it's always tough to record because like we always get to this point in the day where he's got to go down for a nap. And this is my recording window, but I never know when he's actually going to go down for a nap or not. So I don't know. Thanks for being flexible and coming on.
Yeah. No worries. No, I remember those days, man. My daughter stopped taking naps at about 1.5. So it was rough.
1.5? I
had
oh my God.
French doors in my office that were, glass. So she would see that, walk by and there's daddy. So she would just like barge in. So I finally had to get a big curtain to put in front of that. And then if I was like recording, I put on a light that said on the air. So that was let them know, like, don't knock, don't ask, all that stuff.
That's a good idea. I've got the same setup. I've got the French doors and it's like, It sucks because like, I'll be on meetings and stuff. And like Micah comes up and he's just like, Daddy, I want you so much. I want to hang out with you. And you're just like, like go away, kid.
I put a curtain with the big eyelets, big grommets and just little hook. And I just looped it up. And when it was done, I would pull it out of the way and then they just couldn't see me. So if they can't see me, they don't want to like just jump in. So
that's that military training that you have, where you just you just figure things out.
It was born out of desperation. Is what it was.
Yeah, dude. I think the last time that we hung out was, I saw you at FinCon, but I think the last time we actually hung out was like many years ago, right? Wasn't it? I think it was like, where did we go? What place were we
Would it have been the Mastermind meetup in San Diego?
San Diego. Yeah, that's where we were. We were at that steakhouse, the Mexican steakhouse, where Grant put a steak in his pocket, which to this day, I've never seen anybody else do something like that before.
That was a fun trip though.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, I had Grant on the podcast. I should have brought that up. I don't know. I don't even know if he remembers that. I've never seen somebody just like Grant's the funniest guy ever. He just like, for everybody listening, we went to a really nice steakhouse and had a nice dinner and I was sitting next to Ryan and Grant was just having a good time. I don't know. Maybe he had a lot of drinks. I don't know what happened, but he was like, man, I'm going to take this steak is awesome. I'm going to take it. So he like wrapped it in like foil or something.
Yeah. They brought some foil from the kitchen.
Yeah. They wrapped it. And then I've never seen somebody do it. He stuck a steak like in his jacket pocket or something. Just walked out of the restaurant. It was amazing. But yeah, no, that was a long time ago. You've been busy since then, man. You've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think we've all been busy. That would have been the year right before COVID, I think, right? So that would have.
Yeah,
I think all of our lives changed in that time frame. But yeah, it's. I know you had your baby. You've grown your business. You've done a lot.
Yeah.
On my end, I sold my business, a large portion of it. Last year, I kind of took a year away from entrepreneurship. I spent a lot of time with the military. I was deployed for 5 months and then came home and went on another 1-month trip. Daughter's in high school, another one in middle school. So like, we're just busy. But it's great. It's been good.
That's wild, man. So you went from being an entrepreneur to back into the military. Can you back up a little bit and like, I know your story.
Yeah.
I don't know the very beginning of it. I do want to get into that later of just like, how did you even get into this stuff at all? But like you were in the military for quite some time, right?
Yeah. So, why don't I just tell my story now? I'll just give you the brief version. So I went to Clearbrook High School. Not sure if you've been.
Yeah, I've been there.
For those who don't know, Bobby and I went to the same high school, but almost a decade apart. Didn't know each other, but it's a small world.
It is.
I went to Sam Houston State for a year. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It kind of got wanderlust, so I joined the Air Force. I had an amazing experience. I enlisted. I turned wrenches on aircraft, mechanic. I got to see 30-something countries over 5 continents in 6 years. During that time, I got my degree. I took online classes and night school and got that. And then I was completely burned out. I did 5 deployments in that time. And I needed a change. So I got out. I got married, moved across the U.S., got a job, and then my wife deployed. And while she was deployed, like we got married and 2.5 weeks later, she deployed. So during that time, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I started reading everything I could. Now, this was 2006, and the blogs were still very new. So I started reading, and I found these things called personal finance blogs. And it just amazed me that people could have their own story and share that. And you didn't have to go to CNN or Kiplinger's or Yahoo Finance was huge at the time, MSN Finance. So I started one. I found a blog by a guy named Jim Wang. I'm sure you know him. And he had a guide on how to build a blog on WordPress using GoDaddy. And I didn't know these were all affiliate links. So, he probably made a couple $100 off
Jim
me.
made money off of you?
It's well, but he was also super helpful. I asked him a couple questions. He gave me some tips. And what I ended up doing was keeping kind of an accountability for myself, right? Just what I was learning, all the things I didn't know after being in the military. And then I started a website. It was called Cash Money Life. And then another one called The Military Wallet, because I had written some articles on Cash Money Life that were military based, and I realized they needed to be on their own site. Had I been smart, I would have just started a military website to begin with, but
sure,
I didn't, you don't know what you're doing.
Nope.
So, that's my story. That's how I got started. I was out of the military for 8.5 years before I ended up joining the Air National Guard. Air National Guard is kind of like the reserves, but at a state level as well. So you can be activated. The rest of the time is you're in a reserve status. You're working part-time. So part of the reason I did that was I missed being part of something bigger than myself. I was working as an entrepreneur, really solopreneur, right? I had occasional freelance writers, but it was mostly myself and a bunch of other personal finance bloggers I would chat with on forums and then Facebook and, fill in the blank. But being an entrepreneur can be a lonely existence at times. So joining the Air National Guard gave me that opportunity to be part of something bigger than myself, give back, and then continue earning benefits and work toward retirement. And it was different after being out of the military for 8.5 years than going back in. And it's had its challenges. Being away from my family at times for a couple months at a stretch is not easy, especially when your kids are young. But most of the time, it's a typical 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. Pretty easy routine. You fit it in when you can, and it works. So that's in my nutshell. In a nutshell, that's my story. So
are you still so you're in the reserve now, Air National Guard, you said,
yep.
Are you still doing, you said mechanic work?
Yeah. So no, my first job was aircraft mechanic. That was when I was on active duty. And then when I came back in to the Guard, there were no aircraft at the base I was on. They did engine maintenance and several other things. I didn't want to turn wrenches anymore. I wanted to do something different. So I came into a job called Command Post, and that's command and control. It's kind of like an emergency management section of the base. I did that for about 3 years, and then I commissioned as an officer. Now I do logistics readiness officer, and logistics is the movement of people, things, etc. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's a pretty big transition over time. Like what kind of planes were you working on?
F-15s when I was stationed in England, and then C-130s when I was stationed in Texas, Dyess Air Force Base. And then in between, I've been all around the world. I've taken multiple trips out to the Middle East. I've been in different parts of Asia, South America for a small stretch, a lot of Europe. It's been good.
Yeah, dude, I don't know if I've told you this. So my dad was in the Air Force. I don't remember for how many years, but actually my grandfather was a career Air Force guy. Like he enlisted, he was in Vietnam War, Korean War. He was a B-52 tail gunner.
Okay.
So, and he made it up. What's the highest rank that you can make it as an enlisted?
It's Chief Master Sergeant now, but when he got out, depending on when he got out, it might have been Senior Master Sergeant.
I believe he was Master Sergeant. I don't want to butcher this, but my dad's probably gonna watch this and be like, "Oh, you idiot!" But he got as high as you can go, and then he retired, and then he worked at the post office for a long time, so he was like collecting two retirements. But that's always, the Air Force has always been like a big part of, I guess, my family's life. My dad moved around a ton because he was, his dad was in the Air Force, and I actually wanted to go into the Air Force. I wanted to be a pilot. For some reason, I was like really obsessed with F-22s, and I don't really know why. I just thought they were the coolest planes. So I would, when I was a teenager, I would just do like flight simulator games.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I actually could have made it as a pilot, if we're being really honest? Like isn't it pretty hard to actually be a pilot?
Uh, so yes and no. Like one of the biggest limiting factors is health. Like, do you have the right? Can you make it physically? Do you have the vision, and can you pass all the tests? It's super competitive just to get in the door. Once you're in there, the training is really solid. There's a high washout rate for certain types of airframes, but there's a lot of guys who do it, and a lot of guys are very successful. Now, getting your specific aircraft, if you want to be like an F-22 pilot, that's incredibly difficult. To say I want to go down this specific path and fly this specific aircraft. Just getting in the door is hard, much less going to that specific aircraft.
Yeah. I don't, yeah. Like I said, I have no idea. I was like obsessed with F-22s and F-36s. My dad worked on, when he was in the Air Force, he worked on F-16s.
Yep.
So he was, I think he was doing like electrical systems in F-16s.
That's what I did.
Yeah. He did that for a long time. And then I think we moved to California when I was probably, God, like maybe 5. And he started working on B-1 bombers. And so I think he was in that program for many years. And then he came back, he got a job at NASA, but yeah, he loved working on like the F-16s. And so I think for some reason, like from that, I was like, oh, F-15s, I thought F-15s were kind of lame compared to F-16s for some reason. And I don't know why. And F-22s just seemed like the coolest, and F-36s are cool. But like I'm kind of curious, like, since you've been on the inside of that, like to see people become pilots and like go down that route, like, do they put like, are they like the more athletic, like people, or not athletic, I don't know if that's the right word, but like, who do they put in these fighter jets versus like a C-130 pilot? Like, how are they making that determination?
Yeah, no, great question. So when you go to flight school, everybody goes through the same base level kind of undergraduate pilot. And then from there, you get what they call, there's different paths, right? So there's heavies, and then there's the fighters, right? And
Okay.
then they'll graduate you in your class, and then on your class, kind of your graduation level, that's where you put your wish list down, and you say, here's what I want to do, and go from there. And then they'll have a drop night, which is a big party, and everybody finds out which aircraft they're on. I'm not a
That's
pilot.
cool.
I just talked to a few of them, but
yeah.
That's kind of how it is. It's how you ended up ranking within your class at the different stages of training. And then that kind of determines which path you're going down, then which path will determine which airframe you're going to be on. And then it's going to be what's available. In terms of who flies which aircraft, you do have to be very physically fit to fly a fighter aircraft, just because it's very physically demanding with the G pressure. What do you call it? G forces. That's put on your body. So you do have to do a lot. Some of the other aircraft, like a C-17, for example, is going to be very similar to flying a commercial aircraft, but it's similar in the physical aspects, very different from the military perspective. But yeah.
Okay. So they don't like look at you when you come in and go like, okay, you're a badass. We're going to put you on the, like the F-15s or whatever. And like, you're kind of sloppy. We're going to put you in the seat. You know what I mean?
If that were the case, I wouldn't know it. No, I think it comes down to they look at your aptitude, what's your background, how have you performed at the different tests in different schools that you've taken so far, and then they kind of put you and rack you and stack you based on that. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it, but
right.
It's more than just he or she looks like a physical specimen. Let's put them behind the stick of that kind of aircraft.
Yeah, I just assumed it was like Top Gun, like in a way, where it's like they're just these are the best
it's
people.
It's nothing but shirtless Tom Cruise running around, and yeah.
I'm assuming you saw the Top Gun movies. Like, do you watch movies like that and like roll your eyes, or like are you like, oh, this is pretty realistic?
You know what? The new Top Gun was great. I loved it.
Really? Okay.
I thought it was. So they actually did a lot of flying in those aircraft. Tom Cruise learned to fly some of those aircraft, and yeah, apparently it was a lot of it is extremely realistic.
And they were F-15. They had F-15s in that movie, right?
No, that's a naval aircraft. I'm not the expert on those the Navy aircraft, so I'm not the one to quote. But I thought, that movie was good. Now, if you start looking at movies like Iron Eagle from back in the 80s, that was the Air Force trying to make up for their mistake for passing on Top Gun. And Top Gun was a great recruiting tool for the Navy for many, many years.
Yeah.
And, the Air Force apparently had turned down that the script and didn't want to work with it.
That's crazy.
So it worked great for the Navy. But the Air Force said, "Oh, great, we got to do that. So let's go do Iron Eagle." And that just has so many security lapses and factual inaccuracies and so many issues with it. And I don't think it gave the Air Force a good good recruiting tool or a good look to have like teenagers stealing aircraft from an Air Force
Right.
base, loading them with live missiles, and too many things.
Yeah, that doesn't sound real. That doesn't sound realistic at all.
No.
When you were working on the electrical systems for these airplanes, I mean, was it? I mean, you didn't have any? Did you have any background in electrical
No,
engineering
no,
at all?
not at all. I joined the Air Force because I was in college and I was bored. School was something I
Fair
had
enough.
always done well, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to take out a bunch of student loans or have my parents pay for my college, not knowing what I wanted to get into. So I decided I wanted to go see the world. My brother had joined the Marine Corps about 3 years before that, so I knew what the military had to offer. I knew I wasn't Marine. Like, you either are, or you aren't. That's a pretty binary decision.
Yeah.
I am not. So I joined the Air Force. They put me to tech schools, about 5 months of training. Then I went overseas, and then you go do on the job training as well. And that's where I learned. It was a good experience in many ways. The reason I decided to just go for it and take a job that I didn't necessarily want to do as a career was because I knew it would give me life experience that could be applicable elsewhere. So I feel confident now that I can get on YouTube and do just about anything around the house that doesn't involve welding or major electrical work, right? Because I
Right.
turned wrenches for several years. I know enough about tools and myself and my abilities that I can go out and do that. So it gave me those life skills. I got my degree. Air Force paid for that. I left with some money in the bank. Now that I've gone back and joined the Air Force again, I'm working toward a pension. I'll get that when I reach age 60. It'll be a few $1,000s a month. Not as much perhaps as if I would have stayed on active duty and gotten active duty pension, but I'm working part-time now. And how many part-time jobs are there in the world that offer a pension? Not too many. So
Not many.
met my wife in the Air Force, met a lot of long life-lasting friends. The benefits for me have been tremendous. And then I built my website around helping military members improve their financial situation, understand their benefits. So in that way, I've been able to take that specialized knowledge that I learned in the Air Force, plus my passion for personal finance, marry the two, and build something that I was able to sell a couple of years ago, but also help hundreds of thousands of veterans in the process. So for me, it was a life-changing experience and worked out exceedingly well in just about every way I could imagine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can we talk a little bit about the recruiting process? Because, like, did
Yeah.
you go through the normal? Like, I remember, going to Clearbrook High School. I remember the days where, like, the recruiters from all the different branches of the military would come in. Like, did you go that route where you would like went in and talk to one of those dudes, and then they like,
Yeah,
how does it work?
I was the easiest recruit ever. So my brother and I would ride from our house up to Baybrook Mall, and we lived in South Bay area, so it was, a couple mile ride.
Right.
Traffic wasn't as bad back then,
Mm.
but we would ride our bikes up to the mall. He would go talk to the recruiters. He was a senior in high school when we moved to Texas. I was a freshman, so he was ready to go, just change. We moved his senior year. He didn't know too many people. He was ready to get out of Dodge. For me, it was all right. I'll listen because I want to go to the mall, and I'll just wait with him for a while. So I heard the spiel from the recruiters, and they wanted to take my information down. I'd never give it to them.
Right.
And it was just in the back of my mind. I knew what the benefits were, pros and cons, that kind of stuff. And then I just finished my high school. The whole time I'm like, yeah, the Air Force is not the Air Force. The military is not for me. I'm not a military person. Like, it's not, I don't want guns. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to march. I don't like people telling me what to do, all the things, I don't want to go camping. I don't want to be on a boat or a ship for months at a time.
Yeah.
And then I went off to college, and I just the end of my freshman year in college, I was just anxious. I needed to go. I needed to do something. And I think that's probably kind of where my brother was around that age. So I walked into the recruiter's office. I knew I wasn't a Marine. I didn't want to go camping. I didn't want to be on a ship. So I walked in the Air Force office. My grandfather was Air Force as well.
Oh, cool.
And I just talked to him. I said, look, I know what the benefits are. What kind of jobs do you have? And we just started talking. And I was looking at going reserves or Air National Guard to begin with. And the recruiter said, before I send you off, I don't do recruiting for reserves or Air National Guard. You'd have to go drive. It was up near Katy or something. It was like a good 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that. So he said, but let me ask you why you want to do part-time. And I was like, well, I can keep my options open. I can finish my degree here. And he's like, well, you can get tuition benefits. They'll pay for your school while you're in. You go full time, you get the full experience. Otherwise, you might just stay here. Keep in mind, this was before September 11th, so that there wasn't that. This was 1999. There was no constant deployment and rotation. So a lot of guys would join the reserves or the guard, and they would stay at home. They wouldn't do much. It wasn't like it was shortly after I joined. I mean, that changed everybody's lives. So I just thought about it. I was like, yeah, he's right. It's why am I doing this? And the reason I'm doing this is
I don't like the I've done so many podcasts where they're just like scripted, like you've done them, where you just get on and it's like there's 10 questions and you answer the questions and then they're like there's some cheesy thing like what's the number one advice you'd give to whoever for whatever. I don't like those kind of podcasts. I like just talking to people. And I think especially like in the personal finance space, there's so many cool stories like of how like different paths that people took to build wealth or start a business or whatever. Like the military one is very interesting to me because like it doesn't seem like the military doesn't seem like the path to like becoming financially independent to me, but I don't think that's true either. I think there's a lot of people that have come from the military that have done very well. So it's always just kind of cool to hear stories like that. But anyway, welcome back.
Thanks, bud.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. No, you go. No,
your show.
Okay. All right, I'll go. I'll do it. I was going to go back to we were talking about recruiters, and you were talking about just the recruiting process and like how that worked for you. And yours was easy. I've talked to a lot of friends over the years that had, I'm going to say negative experiences with recruiters, but not in like I think it was more of just like, it seems like a lot of people get into the military and don't quite understand exactly what they're getting into. And I don't know, like when I think about recruiters, like, how much can you really explain to like a 17-year-old? Because like I taught high school for a while and like they don't even listen to you half the time. So like, I remember specifically I had a friend that joined the Air Force from Clearbrook High School and they told him they would pay for his college. And then I think he was in for 6 years and he felt like the college thing wasn't how they described it to him, but there's also a good chance like he just didn't understand it. Like, how does it typically work when they say like, hey, you join the Air Force, join the military, we'll pay for your college? Like, what is that experience? How does it actually work?
Yeah, no, great question. So to your point about recruiters, you're right. How much can you explain to a 17, 18, 19-year-old? You're getting sound bites, right? And then recruiters are also incentivized to get people in the door, right?
Yeah.
So they may paint things through a rose-colored lens, right? So
sure.
College is a great example. They can say, hey, the Air Force is going to pay for your college. You can go anywhere you want to go. True. If you can get accepted into the college, but there's, $4,500 a year tuition assistance cap. Now you also can have the GI Bill or other benefits to help pay for things. In my case, they paid for 100% of it because I went up to my cap each year. And then the college that I went to also changed their rates for military members. So what they did was, if our rates are going to be $5,000 for the year, we'll give you a discount so it only will match your cap, right? Or if it's $150 per credit hour, and that's your cap, and we normally charge $200, we'll only charge you $150 per credit hour. So there are schools that will work with you. The other thing is getting time to do it. So if he's trying to go to a school that is only, 8 to 5, normal banker's hours, and that's when his office hours are, and he can't go, then he can't go. My situation, I volunteered to work night shift for 2 years while I went to school. And when I deployed, I took online courses. So I found a way to make it work for me. So I'm not saying anything about his situation. He may not have been able to do the same thing that I did just because he couldn't go to night school like I did, or I worked nights. I worked midnight to 8 a.m. So I went to school from, I think it was 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. or 7 to 10, something like that. So I made it work, but that's what I had to do in my situation. I don't know what his situation was.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? But I just, it's just one of those things, like I've always thought it sounded a little bit complicated. Like that sounds like a pretty, like having to try to fit in a full-time job and college. I mean, I guess people do it in the real world. Like, was that pretty difficult to juggle all that stuff, like learning new skills and then jumping into college as well?
Um, I mean, yes and no. It depends what you want, and it depends on your life situation, right? So if you want it bad enough, you'll do it if your life situation will support it. So I was single at the time. I didn't have any steady girlfriend or anything. So my time was mine. And when I deployed, I took online courses. In the middle of work, I'd have my books. When everybody else is flipping through Maxim magazine and stuff like that, I was, flipping out through the history of aviation or, aircraft crash and rescue, things like that, just so I could get my degree. That was my motivation. And then we worked 24-hour shift for aircraft maintenance because you'd have aircraft going at all different hours of the day. So because of that, we needed to have a night shift. We needed to have a midnight to 8 a.m. So I volunteered for that shift because the only other option I was going to get was going to be the swing shift, which would have been probably the when would that be, like 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. or 4 to midnight time frame, one of those, and then I would be able to take classes there. So I was able to work with my leadership to get the shift that allowed me to take classes. But if you have a family or significant others, you might not be able to do that midnight to 8 a.m. shift, or if your job doesn't allow that because you're only kind of banker's hours. So it's just like anything else, man. You're going to make it work, or you'll find what works for you.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Do you remember, what you were getting paid when you started? You remember
Yeah,
your starting salary?
I actually looked at my Social Security benefit page the other day. So if you guys haven't done this, get curious and log into the Social Security website. It'll help you understand what your future benefits will be, but it'll also show you your historic wages. So my first year in the military, I think I made like $14,000 for Social Security wages. Now I was a lower ranking enlisted member. I had my food and housing paid for. I ate at the chow hall, dining facility, if you will, and I stayed in the dorms, but I didn't pay for either one of those. But still, like, you're talking $14,000 is, how much? 1,200 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. Not very much.
Yeah. It's not very much. By the time I separated, I was a staff sergeant, which is E5. It's kind of a middle rank in the enlisted side. It was 2006. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was somewhere around $25,000 for Social Security wages.
Okay.
It might have been slightly higher than that. Don't quote me. It probably was. But when you move off base, they give you a housing allowance that's tax free. They also give you a food allowance that's tax free. I don't remember what it was back then. I lived in Abilene, Texas, which is not the highest cost of living area. I was probably getting about $750 or $800 a month for an apartment. Again, this was 2006 timeframe, and food allowance is probably $250 a month. So think about maybe $1,000 a month tax free to cover food and housing, food and housing. So it wasn't bad. It's not a massive amount of money, but for me, because I was single, it was enough to get by. I can tell you now that I'm a captain in the Air National Guard. If I were on active duty with the years of service that I have in, my base pay is somewhere around $8,600 a month. So you're talking, what's that? It's close to $100,000 a year base pay. It's not quite. I think 8,800 a month would be 100,000.
Dude, I can't do that. But yeah, that sounds right.
I think it's 8833. Well, it's if you back, anyway. And then there's also a housing allowance. So I live just outside of Nashville. Housing is expensive here, so that I want to say is like $2,800 a month tax free, and then the food allowance is about $300 a month. That said, I'm a part timer, so I only work 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. So I don't make $8,000 a month. I don't make the housing allowance and those things. But for somebody who was active duty in my situation, they would be making a low six-figure job, So base pay would get them close to $100,000 a year, plus about $36,000 in tax-free entitlements where I live. Plus, there's healthcare. Healthcare is exceptional in the military, cost-wise. It's essentially free. I don't want to say it's exactly free. There are some co-pays or things you have to pay here and there. This is when you're active duty, and it's tremendous. Now, I'm not on active duty. I'm a part-timer, but I have access to reduced cost healthcare through them. and it's cost $250 a month for my family and I. Now, I was an entrepreneur, and before I joined the Guard, I was paying, and this was about almost 10 years ago, I was paying $1,000 a month. I know now, just from looking, it would be probably about $1,500 a month or more. This is my wife and two kids.
Yeah.
1,500 is probably a reasonable estimate. And that's before you get into anything like co-pays, deductibles, max out of pocket, all that stuff. So when I'm looking at $250 a month, so $3,000 a year is my total premiums, and then the max out of pocket is it's either $1,000 or $3,000. I forget, like for everything. That's after co-pays, deductibles, everything. So it's extremely affordable, and it's one of the reasons that I joined the Guard to begin with. There are tons of, like I said earlier, I wanted to have that sense of being part of something bigger than myself and have that camaraderie. And but the benefits are great. The healthcare, pay. 1 week in a month, I go in for a couple of days and I get pretty decent pay out of it, and I'm working toward retirement. Again, how many part-time jobs are there where you're going to pull a pension when you're age 60?
Yeah, not many, dude. Yeah, dude, I would. Can I join
You can join
just
right now,
for
man. I will bring you in.
Dude, just for the freaking the insurance stuff alone. My God, dude. That's the worst. I think that's something I didn't realize about becoming an entrepreneur. Like, I think people, look at self-employed people and they're like, oh, they just like vacation all the time whenever they want, and everything's great. They get rich. It's no problem. But like, the healthcare thing sucks. Like, it's brutal, man. And it's like, especially right now we're talking, because I've got employees now. It's like, you start looking at like healthcare plans for employees, and they're all garbage. Like, they're all high deductible. It all sucks. It's all expensive. That's the worst thing about it. So like, yeah, the idea of healthcare being cheap sounds freaking great.
It is. You pay for it in other ways.
Okay. Can you expand on that?
Sure. Yeah. Last month I spent last year I spent 5 months in Kuwait, and I spent another month in Korea. Now they were great experiences, but I paid for having access to that by my military service. Right. I'm not, this is not anything about those countries, but for those 6 months I was away from my family. Right.
Yeah.
So
that sucks.
That's something that you do. But my wife, she's a veteran. She understands. My daughters have been very understanding. It was not easy for any of us. Especially my daughters, they're 11 and 14. So they're still at an age where, they need daddy. And, I would do FaceTime with them. We had good internet connection. I'd do phone calls, but it's not the same as being there. It's not the same as being able to help them with their homework or see their school events and stuff like that. So now, as a part-timer, I'm not gone every year. Most years, it's like 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. But, I've been in for 9 years now. I've had last year I was gone for 6 months. 3 other times I've been gone for at least 2 months. And then there's other times where I've been gone for like a week or two here or there. Sometimes they're great trips, and sometimes they don't interfere with other family issues or events. But it's never easy from that respect.
Sure. Are we? You're probably the only person that I know that might know the answer to this. Are we about to get into World War III? Like, are we cool or are we not cool right now? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I can't speak for the world stage. I can't speak for the military or anything like that. I can say that we live in a tremendous time in history in many ways. So, we can look at the news and look at all of the doomsday stuff. But when you look historically, we're at one of the safest times in history. Even though there are these wars going on, and they're ugly wars, they're nothing like the scale that we had back in World War II, World War I, or all the wars before that just have constantly going on. There's disease and stuff like that, but we have modern medicine and all these things. So I just choose to be an optimist and look on the bright side. So
that's good. I'm so glad you said that instead of like, yep, we're probably in trouble, dude. Yeah, that's just something I think about. I feel like I've had other friends in the military, actually Air Force. I have a lot of Air Force friends that talk about like there are threats that we don't know about, like general public. Like, we have no idea that like people are pointing missiles at us and stuff. And like there's these confrontations that kind of happen behind the scenes that even the news doesn't cover, that I just kind of wonder about, like, how close are we at any given moment of just everything changing,
Yeah, there are always things that are going on behind the scenes. all we can do is trust that our military is ready and available if needed. But at the same time, I don't anticipate World War III going anytime soon.
I love it. It's actually funny. You mentioned Abilene. I was born in Abilene. And I think
Okay.
I'd have to actually ask my parents. I'm pretty sure I was there because my dad was working on F-16s there.
B1s is where they
B1,
had,
yeah.
you mentioned B1s. They had B1s at Abilene.
Yeah, that's probably
so
what it was.
Dyess Air Force Base. So that could be why you're born there.
That was exactly it. Yeah, my dad.
There you go.
Wow, dude, this is a weird small world thing that we got going on.
It is
here.
a small world, man. Yeah.
Did you like your time in Abilene? I remember it very briefly as, I was there when I was young, but I remember it being like pretty small town, like pretty.
It's a small college town. There's a military base, and they've got I think is it TCU out there? I forget. It's been a while. When I was there, it was about 120,000 people. I liked it. Super friendly people. Buffalo Gap area was nice. I'd ride my motorcycle up through there and winding roads and all that. But honestly, half the time I was there, I was overseas on some deployment or something else, and the other half I was working night shift. So I got to see it on the weekends, and the rest of the time I saw it at night. But it's a fine town. It was probably what I needed at the time to focus on my career and myself.
Yeah, that's where I was born. I think that's where my parents met too, at like a Denny's or something. Back in I think in Denny's you could actually like drink. They had like happy hours and stuff. I don't know if it's that way anymore.
I have no idea, man.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's just so funny, man. I just have very vague memories of Abilene. Just remember it's like really small, kind of small town. But I'm curious about we should probably actually talk about money at some point in this podcast. Is there a culture in the military of just like talking about personal finance at all, or is it like pretty? Nobody talks about it.
It's a mixed bag. It's going to depend. Just think about your office space. Teachers, right? You were a teacher at a high school. Yeah. So do teachers talk about money? Well, they probably talk about their pension plans. They probably talk a little bit about bills. They talk about this and that. You're going to have that in the military. There's a big conversation in the military about the pension plan, especially when you're in Guard Reserves, because it's based on points instead of years of service, right? It's how much time you have that gets converted into years of service. So you have a lot of that. And there are a ton of benefits in a lot of ways that you can increase your pay or benefits by, especially when you're inactive, such as myself, kind of a part-timer. If you're taking different orders just means you're going on to duty for a while. If you go on a temporary duty locally versus going on a temporary duty somewhere else where you're going to get per diem, a lot of different things. So yes, there's conversation about it, but probably not as much as I think there could be, just based on how complicated the pay system can be at times. And that's partly why I started my website. It was the resource I wanted that I couldn't find when I separated from active duty. So now I've built the military wallet. That's my former site into, there were probably 1,000 articles when I sold it. The new owners are doing great with it. They're doing amazing things. I still help as a consultant with them.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's been a great situation. They're doing great things with the site. That's what I'm passionate about is, serving the military, serving in the military myself, helping the military community, and then personal finances. So to be able to bring those things together for me is that's awesome.
Yeah. When I was a teacher, people did kind of talk about money, but it was mostly complaining. It's mostly I don't know, man. It was just, every time there was anything that had to do with money, people were just like, oh, this sucks. Cause teachers don't get paid very much.
Yeah.
And I do remember that the retirement piece was a big part. Cause the Texas retirement system is, I don't know, not very good. Actually it can be good if you get to a position where you're making great money later in your career. Cause it's average. I don't know if it's still the same now, but it was last 5 years of pay. I think you got 50% of that if you stayed in all the way. But I remember when I quit my teaching job, they sent me a letter and they were like, hey, you can pull your funds out of the retirement system or leave it in and we'll guarantee a 2% return for the rest of your life or something. And it was such a weird deal. It was what? It doesn't even cover inflation. Is there something like that in the military? Is the military you said it's on a point system. I don't know, can you pull your money out of it? How does that work if you decide to just walk away completely?
Great question. So the military has, if you're active duty, There's two systems. One of them started in 2018. The one before that is called the High 36. So it takes an average of the highest 36 months of pay, and then they build your pension off of that. The new system is called blended retirement, and it mixes kind of like a 401k component with a fixed pension. So it's the teacher pension in the military. It's kind of similar in that regard, right? So they take an average of your high, but also military and teachers often don't get paid a lot, right? And there's probably, you hear complaining because it's probably a pass the hat situation, like, oh, somebody's retiring or this needs, so everybody's like, it feels like you're constantly dropping $20 for this or that, or somebody's going away or somebody's coming, and that's just part of the nature, right? But yeah, the pension system, the old one was, that's what I'm under, is a cliff vesting, meaning you hit your 20 years, you're grandfathered, or you're in, you vested. If not, you leave before that, you get nothing. Now you can participate in the thrift savings plan, which is kind of like a 401k, but for government service. And that's yours. You take it with you. The new system has a component where there's a little bit of both. You still need the 20 years to get full credit, but you get a matching contribution to your TSP, whereas I don't. So it's a little bit of both. For the newer folks. Now, for an inactive person such as myself, somebody who's not full-time, the reason I said is points. You still need your 20 years, but they give you points, like 1 point per day of service, and then they divide that out and convert that to years when you're done, and then they use that as your multiplier. So my system is 2.5% per year. So if you do 20 years, you're at 50% of your base pay. So that's how it's done. And then the new system is 2% per year. So it's 20% less, but it's still 40%, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad. You said the thrift saving plan, is that what you called it?
Yep, TSP.
So is that something where you can set aside money and invest it in something? Like, is there some kind of vehicle to put it in?
Yeah, it's just like a 401k. There are a limited number of investment accounts. Basically, you've got like a S&P 500, you've got a small stock, I think it's like the Russell 3000 or something like that, and that covers your U.S. So there's two options for U.S. funds. You have an international fund, then you have government bonds, and then you have corporate bonds, and that's it. But because of what they're covering so many different stocks. If you had a Vanguard Total International stock market, a Vanguard Total Stock Market, and then a good bond fund, really that's all you need, right? So that's what the TSP does. Now they have other like life cycle plans in there as well, but they're all based on those 5 core funds.
Okay. So you can actually invest in ETFs, not just like the Admiral share stuff. Mutual funds.
It's only 5 specific funds, and they're TSP specific funds, but it's the equivalent to having like a Vanguard Total International. It is not the specific, but it's comparable to it.
Okay. Can you borrow against it?
Yeah, it's like a 401k. I don't recommend doing it, but yeah, it's essentially the same rules as a 401k. It's just only available to government employees.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it sounds pretty straightforward. Are there people, like, one of the things that would happen in teaching quite often that I saw, like I mentioned, people would like, it was the last 5 years average. So you would see people kind of like, as they got a little bit closer to the end of their career, they would start really like going on a track to like get the highest paying job possible. And like, they would go become like an administrator or like, is there that kind of track like in the military where it's like, okay, I'm getting kind of close. Like I need to bump my income up. Here's how I do it.
Not really. The military is a more structured promotion pathway, right? So there are 9 enlisted ranks and 10 officer ranks, and you progress one at a time. You can't jump. You can't go lateral to another. So in Texas, you can't, you might be able to go from one district to another and go from a teacher to a coach or an administrator or something where you're going to boost your pay. In the military, you can't do that. You have to go one through the other. Now, they do have pay raises based on years of service, but those cap out at a certain time as well. So really the only way to do it is to get promoted. And at a certain point, you're going to cap out on your promotions, either because you've reached the top or because there's nowhere for you to go. My brother, for example, his last 2 years or 3 years in service, I forget, his career field didn't promote anybody because they were maxed out at those ranks. So he was kind of stuck there. And then he hit what's called high year tenure, which means this is it. Like, you've got your 20 years in, this is your rank. We're not going to let you stay in any longer. So he was forced to retire. Now, at the same time, he retired at 38 and he has a pension for the rest of his life. You can't do that in most other career fields. But I know he would have had that option to promote. He could have stuck around another 2 to 4, probably another 4 to 6 years after. And then if you hit that next one, you can stay a little longer, and that boosts your pension as well. So it's kind of an up or out system. And it's also based on sometimes career field. If there's nowhere for you to go, there's nowhere for you to go, but it's also based on the needs of the military. Like right now, there's recruiting and retention issues because the economy has been doing better, or people just don't want to join. So they'll let people stay in a little longer. So,
okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it just changes based on the needs of the military.
Okay. So you said your brother retired at 38.
Yeah.
That's early. That's early. Is there like I don't know, a fi culture? Like, is there kind of like a subculture in the military of like retiring early?
Is. Yeah. I would say it's kind of newer. So when my brother retired, this was 2016 timeframe, I'm thinking.
Okay.
So it's been a few years. Was it 2016 when did he join? I think he enlisted in 96. So it would have been around that time frame. So yes, there is a fire culture. I think it's newer. I don't think he would have wanted to at that time, or really. You have to start early with the fire culture, right?
Yeah.
But having a military pension or any pension can go a super long way toward helping that happen. I mean,
for sure.
Imagine if you're 40 years old and you're already bringing in, just say it's $2,500 a month or $3,000 a month or something like that. And how much do you need to live off? If that covers half your needs, then it doesn't take long to build a nest egg to cover that difference. Or it gives you that freedom to kind of do the coast fire or do the, I'm going to choose meaningful work versus working for the highest pay. So yes, it exists. And I think it's becoming more and more popular. There are several other blogs and books out there that people are really bringing attention to that. So it's good.
Yeah. I feel like Jillian Johnsrud, I had her on the podcast a while ago, and have you talked to her before?
I know who she is, and I watched most of that podcast.
Oh, you did?
Before coming on this one. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I believe she said her husband was in the military, and that was part of her story. Was like really interesting to me because I was just like, she was like a barista, and I'm pretty sure he was in the military, and then they were millionaires, and I was like, that's such a wild, such a wild story. It's just kind of interesting as I talk to more people. Like, you can kind of do a lot even if you don't have a high salary. It's pretty cool. But anyway, that was just kind of an aside. I was curious. I want to go. I know I'm not allowed to talk very much about your
Ask
business.
away, man. Ask away.
But I know which questions to avoid, which are the money questions. But what I do want to know, going through that process, right? So like, I haven't sold my businesses. I've thought about it. I got real close. I think 2 years ago, I got pretty close, and I went through the process, and I was like, I don't like this, and then I backed away from it because I've seen all of my friends. Like in our mastermind group, like I've seen all of my friends sell their businesses and then go through like this weird bout of depression almost. And they seem kind of like lost. They're like, what am I going to do with my life? What's my purpose? And then they almost always seem to buy their websites back. So my thought was just like, well, I'll just keep going with mine and just scale it. But like, did you deal as you went through the process? Like when did you realize it was time? Mm-hmm. And then 2, did you deal with like those issues of just like, what the hell do I do now?
Yeah. So I think the emotional impact of selling your business is under discussed. Nobody talks about it until you get into like a little mastermind group. Everybody sees that big, flashy sales number, and they must think, wow, you did all this work, and then you reach the end, and you hit the goal. It must be amazing. You go out and buy a Corvette or a Porsche or whatever you're going to do. And then your life is just perfect, right?
Right.
It's not like that. Think about any major event in your life, right? And what was it like? Think of, you win the world championship. That's great. But now you got to get ready and defend your title, right? You got to go out there and do something. The things that make an entrepreneur great are the drive, right? And the curiosity and the problem solving. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I mean, maybe a few people, but
You might be smarter than me. I don't know.
no, I'm not. I'm of decent intelligence, but I'm insanely curious. I like to pull at that thread and figure out how things work. And
Right.
I like to solve problems. And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So when you sell your business, that aspect is gone from your life, right? And you've been building and working on this thing. In my case, I had worked on it for, like 13, 14 years, something like that.
Yeah.
That said, I haven't answered any of your question yet. Like, how did I feel?
No, it was great though.
I was perfectly at peace with it. But I knew it was a decision that once I made, I was going to make it and be like it was my decision, and that was it. My decision. Let's just back it up. So I've been in a situation. I started my business in 2007. I became full time in early 2010. I had enough cash and cash flow that I've been stable since then. When the company was knocking on the door to potentially buy my business, I was in a very good spot. I didn't have to sell, kind of like, I'm assuming, like where you were. Now, would that money be life-changing? Yes and no. Like, I was already well on my way toward financial independence. And I had a job that I enjoyed, a business I enjoyed. Now, there are unknown questions out there, the variabilities of Google and internet marketing and how things change. Obviously, nobody saw where AI is taking us now.
Yep.
So it came down to talking to this company. I know who the company is. They're very well respected in the space. And I know what their intentions were for the website. I knew they were going to keep growing it. I know they're going to continue to serve the military community the right way. So that's part of what I was looking for. So you and I have seen people sell their business to companies that immediately slathered them with ads, changed the tone of the website completely.
Oh yeah.
Like did a 180 to what it was. I didn't have the fear that that's what it was going to be. I've gone through discussions with multiple buyers in the past where I had the feeling that's what it was going to be. I just didn't get a good feeling about it. So I walked away, and it wasn't the right time or the right partner. It felt like the right time. It felt like the right partner. COVID had just happened. We actually had been talking. We were starting a little bit talking about numbers. Then COVID happened. They said, well, we're going to take a step back.
Right.
And then we readdressed it the following year, but they were still interested. I knew where my income was and where things were. And I was having a conversation, and the person I talked to, he said, well, do you have a number in mind? I said, honestly, I don't. I said, I don't need to sell. I said, it's going to take a Godfather offer. And he just laughed. And he's like, okay, well, what does that look like? I said, I don't know. Let me get back to you. So right. I sat over the weekend and I looked at where my income was, where I thought the site could go. I also looked at the value of having the site because this was a strategic acquisition for them, right? This wasn't just a little portfolio piece that they're buying. So I understood the value to them. I understood the value to myself. So when we got on the phone, I told him my story. And I told him why I started the site, kind of like we're talking now, what the site means to the community, what it means to me, how I built it, the way I built it, why, all the things that make the site what it is. And at the end, I said, here's the number I have in mind. And he just kind of, okay, that's not what I was expecting to hear. Let me take it back to ownership, leadership, and we'll get back to you. And they came back, and it was their offer was a little different than the offer I couldn't refuse, if you will.
Right.
But it was close enough, and I felt comfortable enough with the situation that I was completely at peace at that point. Like, let's do it. Now, that's how the negotiation went. Now I had the numbers to back everything up and everything
Sure.
else. Like I told the story with numbers, with my story, everything together. That said, the day it took forever, like once we handshook, it took like 7 or 8 months for the deal to finally go through. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It took much longer than I expected. Turns out they were working multiple deals at the same time, and several other things happened. Everything went through. When it finally went through, I was a nervous wreck. Like that day, I was just like, nervous and like just felt like a wreck. And then when it came through and I got the wire, I took my phone and I showed it to my wife, and she's like, "That's great." And she turned and looked at me, and like, I didn't really have much expression. She's like, oh, it's not great. I'm like, no, it is. Like, that just happened. But it took time for me to process it. And then I ended up going to a concert that night with a friend. We had already planned that, and I got good and drunk, and it was great.
Yeah.
I hadn't really been, I hadn't drunk much before that for a long time. And I just like all that nervous energy. It just, anyway, he took care of me. We had fun, but it's the months after that. So you're talking about what's the aftermath, the
Right.
psychological aftermath. I just jumped right back into working with them because I had to help them transfer the site to their stuff, to their servers. And then we ended up merging a couple of websites together. So I was busy coordinating and managing that process. I didn't work on anything on my own for a while. So I worked for them for a couple hours a day or a couple days a week. And then the rest of the time I did a huge physical and mental declutter and digital declutter. I went through my computer and scrubbed files. Like, you've had the computer, I've got Macs. I've had them since 2010, I think.
Yeah.
And every time I get one, I just move everything over. So I just went through and deleted years and years worth of files and apps. I went through closets. I cleaned out the garage. I cleared out books. I threw stuff away. I cleaned things. And that was my way of just processing and just clearing everything out. And it was probably the best thing I could have done at that time, just to recenter myself and clear out all that physical, mental, and digital clutter. And I've never really done that, but I did that for a few weeks, if not months. And then I went on a huge learning binge where I normally read about 4 to 6 books a month. That's between reading and audio. And that's podcasts on top.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's good. For a couple months, I was probably putting down like double that, like, 10 to 12.
Whoa.
Because I had cleared all the physical and mental and digital clutter. And then I wasn't doing any work for myself, and that was intentional. I needed to take a step back and what is it that I want to do, right? Ask those questions, but also read for entertainment or just completely decompress. And it took a while, but I felt good to be able to do that. So I wouldn't call it a full sabbatical because I was still involved with working for them as a consultant. But it was a sabbatical from doing everything else with my stuff. And that was a huge mental break for me. I was actually able to do something similar last year when I was deployed. So I had 6 months. The time I was in Kuwait was only 5 months, but I was on active duty for 6 months. And then I was home for about 2 months. And then I went to Korea for a month. During those 7 months, and then most of that time in between, and then even after and a little before, basically the last year, I did nothing for myself, business-wise, entrepreneurship-wise.
Right.
I still have a couple websites. They're still earning money, but they don't require daily updates. So I earn money from those, but I was able to focus my time completely on the military when I was on, and when I was off duty, it was completely family time. So again, that was a huge break from the entrepreneurial grind, because it can be a grind at times if you allow it to be.
For sure.
So yeah, that's how I handled selling my business. And then there were times with them. Then they also ended up buying Cash Money Life a few months later, and it was probably about 8 months after they bought the military wallet. But that one was completely decided to merge the content into the military wallet to give it an SEO boost and a boost of content.
Okay.
So I spent a few months cleaning up Cash Money Life, updating old content, getting it ready to merge over. So we wanted to clean everything up on the original site first, delete everything that we didn't. And then there's a few other things for any SEO geeks out there, probably the 12 of you who are listening. On the back end, you have to align things with categories and authors and everything so that when you export from one, import into the other, it lines up properly. So we did all that, and I laid the groundwork. They did the actual flipping of the switch and export, import, but I I did most of that setting of the stage, and it was months of work, but it's stuff that I enjoy doing. I was already on a contractual, consulting contract with them, so I just busted it out. I enjoyed it, so it was fun.
Yeah. You see, just from what I've seen, like you seem to kind of enjoy the technical, maybe not technical SEO stuff, but the SEO strategy. And I see you and Larry talking about that stuff all the time. We just changed over to a new website theme. Actually, it went live like Christmas Day, which was not the plan at all. But it was, I mean, it's a massive project. And when you have hundreds of pieces of content, like, it takes a freaking long time to do it. But
it does.
But yeah, so are you happy that you got out before AI like really started taking hold?
Yeah, I'm happy I got out for several reasons. For me, selling my website was actually kind of a natural transition. I looked at it. Let's go deep, right? So
let's do
it. What do we really own, right? Like in this sense, the military wallet is something that I created, but it serves a bigger community than just myself, right? Yes, it put food on my family's table and is an asset in a business that I built, but in a sense, it belongs to a community outside of myself. So when this company wanted to buy it, I knew they could do a better job of growing it than I could. So in that sense, I was ready to make that transition and give it to an organization that could become a better steward and do more with it than I would be able to. So I was happy and ready to move on at that point once I knew I could put it into the right hands and I knew it was going to continue growing. I also got a very good price for it, and that made that transition very helpful for me. Sure. But that was the big thing for me was, will this site be in a better place after I sell? And the answer was yes. So that was a big point in bringing me peace. You talk about other guys who have sold their sites, and we've watched the new buyers tank them, and then the guys buy them back, and then they try to dig it back out of a hole and build it back to what it was. I never felt like that was going to be something that was an issue for me. So I was happy to sell for all the reasons I just said. That said, yes, I'm glad I got out before AI. AI is going to change things in many ways, and I think it's going to do a lot of good things. For content production, there are ways where people are going to systematically create a lot of great content. Some of it will be very helpful, and you can do it at scale, programmatic SEO, and you can create very helpful and accurate content doing that. But I think there's going to be a lot of junk created, way more junk than helpful junk.
I think so too.
It's going to make things a little more difficult in the short term as Google and Bing and other, well, even AI tries to make sense of what's really the best content, right? If we're not careful, not we, but whoever's building AI, you're going to get AI creating AI content, and then other AI is going to be using this, and it's just going to feed itself, and nobody's going to know what the real content is, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be, it's just going to become.
Yeah, I don't even know what Google's going to do. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to Grant about it the other day. Like, Google's very clearly, and this is for the SEO nerds that want to talk about this stuff, but like, Google's very clearly gone to like just high domain authority websites. And to me, for a lot of the big like high volume keywords, and to me that actually makes a lot of sense, because like if you know that any publisher can now create thousands of pieces of content that might suck and then get it indexed by Google like right away and mass upload everything, like I would probably try to go to the Forbes and the Bankrate, like just all the sites that have been doing it for a long time, because they're probably going to do it at least better than everybody else. Like that would be my like, hey, let's just pump up the really trusted websites for a while until we figure out what the heck's going on, and then we can sort it out later. That's my guess is what they're doing.
Yeah, but then it's kind of chicken or egg, right? How do you, as a small entrepreneur such as we are, how do we become topical authorities? And that's where you start getting into topical relevancy and topic silos and things like that. But it's hard. I think, when I started in 2007, the barrier to entry was, it was Wild West in a way, in a sense that you could create something and rank exceedingly fast, but nobody knew what we were doing at the time. There were a few, but if I knew now what I knew, if I knew then what I know now,
Yeah.
I'd be multimillionaire many times over because I could figure these things out.
Right.
The barrier to entry is even lower now, but there's more competition, so much so that it's so much easier to create anything today than it ever has been, and it will only get easier to create. But because of all the noise, it's so much harder to break through. Back when I started, anybody could break through.
Yeah.
Now it's much more difficult.
Yeah. I'm just gonna keep trying to navigate it. So I'm just building a team instead, and we're just gonna go head first into like the AI stuff, and hopefully we survive. But yeah, it's been interesting to just see, because I came into our mastermind group. I think I was the last person that was brought into that group. And I think I'm the youngest person in there, which is kind of wild because like I don't feel young at all. I feel old. But it's been interesting to just kind of see, all the guys that started so long ago and like how much it's changed. And I just wonder like, how much more, I don't know. I don't even know where it's going, to be honest with you. I think probably like, as an entrepreneur, like I think you're supposed to have a vision for where the future is going. Like when it comes to like Google and AI and all that stuff, I don't even really know. I'm just like, we're just going to try to do our best and see if we can come out the other side of this thing.
I think right now that's the best plan.
Yeah. I think it's the only plan. I don't know what else to do. I mean, we're doing a lot of our own products too. And I think that's a little bit, I feel like that's the right play. There's difficulties there too with creating your own info products around different, freelancing topics, but like that feels like, let's try to own as much stuff as we can internally instead of like relying on other things. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to run out of time here shortly, but I did have like one kind of last question for you. Coming out of Clearbrook High School, 17 years old. Do you ever think you were going to become wealthy?
Define wealthy.
Well,
that's just curveball.
Yeah.
Yes, but how, I don't know. Right. So
yeah,
wealth was never my goal. Maybe I shouldn't say wealthy. Right. I knew I would be successful. I didn't know what path that would take. And I never could have imagined the path that I was on. So keep in mind, when I was leaving high school, graduating, the internet was around, but this was 1998 when I graduated. So the internet was very different than it is now. And if you wanted to buy a domain, like you couldn't just go buy a domain really quickly and set up a website in a matter of a few clicks.
Right.
I could start a WordPress site from buying a domain, buying a web hosting, get WordPress up and running in probably half hour to or less. Back then it was not a thing.
Okay.
So no, I had no idea I would join the military. I was anti me going in the military. And a year later I was in the military.
Yeah.
And then, I took one computer science class in college. I hated it. I took it because it was a requirement to graduate. It was a semester long. I don't know how I got a B. I don't even remember what it was. It was just, I had people show me how to do stuff most of the time, like my assignments. It was terrible. But then I started a website as a hobby. And I just figured it out. I think I've not doubted myself. I knew I would become successful because I'm curious. And, if that's the big thing, every entrepreneur I know, every successful entrepreneur I know is just insatiably curious about something and is connecting dots, is filling in blanks, and then is figuring out how to do something. And I've always had that. So yeah, leaving high school, I knew I would become successful. What that looked like, I didn't know. And at the time, if you would have said, yeah, you're going to be a digital marketing entrepreneur and you're going to do X, Y, and Z, I would have laughed because none of that stuff existed, right? It wasn't a career field when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And, that's where AI is today. My daughters are 11 and 14 and they're asking me to help set them up some accounts so they can go do some AI things because they want to try to make money doing AI. Like, I love this as
that's
a
awesome.
Father. Yeah. So
yeah, that's great.
I'm going to try to get them, help get them started with that. But like, what is it going to look like 10 years from now for them? They're just getting started now, but like, what's that going to look like? So no, I didn't know I'd be wealthy. I knew I'd be successful. What that looked like, no idea, but I couldn't foresee it because it didn't exist yet. So now I'm looking at my daughters and like, they're getting excited about AI. What's going to exist for them in 10 years? That's awesome.
Well, maybe the human race just goes away.
No,
Maybe
I
we're
don't
the
think that's
last.
going to happen. Again, I'm Mr. Optimist over here. I
like
think
it.
it's going to do good things, and I don't think AI is going to take all the jobs. I think there are going to be people running AI and writing prompts
I
and
agree with
doing
that.
things. It's going to create a lot of jobs too. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, great answer, man. I appreciate it. It's been great to catch up. Hopefully we get to hang out again in person
You too,
soon.
Bobby. Yeah. I hope we have another mastermind meetup in the spring. That'd be good.
That'd be great, man. Yeah, I'll start pushing for it. I'll start
Awesome.
pestering people. So anyway, man, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, we'll talk soon.